Hey guys, welcome to the Hybrid Athlete Sports Science Shorts. In these series of videos, what we're going to do is look at some terms that are used within sports science, sports performance, that are often poorly understood, and we're going to give you some operational definitions, some examples, and hopefully give you some insight in a very sort of short, succinct manner of how you can use these concepts within your own sort of training or in your own coaching if you're a coach. So today we're going to talk about training load. So training load is a term that is thrown around, that is very commonly used, but it's not easily defined. Now, there's several criticisms of the use of the word load in a scientific setting, where the use of the word implies a force that can be measured in the unit of load, which is the Newton. So as McLaren et al. In 2022 put it, training load is a multi-dimensional construct which reflects the amount of physical training that an athlete is doing or as it completes or experiences. And it's used to basically quantify an exercise stimulus based on its nature, its type, its frequency, its volume, and the intensity at which that exercise or activity is performed. So within an athlete monitoring context, the term training load is a construct label that is assigned to the above constitutive definition, and that it shouldn't be confused with the mechanical definition of load. Accordingly, training load can incorporate a variety of operational definitions and can be measured in numerous ways. So what that's basically saying is that we have all these different definitions of load, and that as long as the coach understands them and how they interact with each other, then, or the athlete understands how they interact with each other, then they can be useful. But in some sense, they're quite abstract and difficult to pin down. For the sake of this video, we're going to talk about load in the more broader, somewhat vaguer, but more commonly understood sense, which is defined above as a way of measuring an athlete's sort of training stress, if you will. So when we talk about loads, well, there's a difference between loads and stress, but that's a different topic for a different time. But when we talk about training loads, we can put these into three main categories. So we have external load, so that would be pace, power, load on a bar, for example. We have internal load, which would be things like heart rate, VO2 max, lactate threshold. And then we also have a perceived load as well. So that's how hard we're either finding an individual session, a training day, or even a full training block. So we can use things like a Borg scale to measure that, as well as, just asking our athletes, how are we feeling today? How was our training? How was our energy on a scale of 1 to 10? So if we're then going to measure load, each of these measurements, the perceived measurements in particular, are usually related by some kind of multiplier. So for example, if we were doing, say, a 60-minute run at an RPE of 5, our training load might be 60 times 5, which might be a training load of 300. So that means that we can roughly compare across modalities. So let's say we then did a 30-minute interval session at an RPE of 10 out of 10, that would also give a training load of 300. So it allows us to compare across different modalities. However, we need to be careful because those modalities aren't directly comparable, because the stresses that we cause through those modalities and the physiological responses aren't exactly comparable. So we always need to understand as a coach, when we're using these loads, where they're applicable to our overall training volume, but also where maybe there's a differentiation between there. So on face value, these things might seem pretty closely linked. However, these links between external, internal, and perceptive loads are often more dynamic than we might think. For example, if we've got a session where our athlete is underfueled and it might be an easy 2-hour ride, which might be a perceived effort of 5 or 6 out of 10, that might make it feel more like a 7 or 8 out of 10 as well. And also the accumulation of fatigue across a block of training, especially for making those blocks progressive, the intensity is increasing, the volume's increasing, whatever that might be, then, as each session then carries over to the next, if we're not getting enough adequate recovery in there, then those sessions might feel, a lot harder, even though that our external load, our power or pace might be the same. The internal markers like cardiac drift, heart rate might be elevated, and I'm going to do the next video is going to be on cardiac drift and this sort of dissociation between this idea of steady state and what it is and isn't, because steady states are really, again, it's a construct that we use a lot, but it doesn't mean the same thing in every single context. So cardiac drift's a good example of why that might be. So that's going to be the next video. So this idea that our same pace and power is always going to give the same relative effort shows that there's that the fact that it doesn't exist shows that there's this dissociation, which isn't easy for me to say, obviously, between our external load, our internal load measures, and also our perception as well. So these are forever shifting. So there's other factors that can influence that as well, other than just than poor fueling or accumulation of fatigue over a block. You know, poor sleep, mood state, illness, other lifestyle commitments, stress. These can all create a drift in our load links, if you want to call it that. So why measure load? Well, effective load monitoring allows us to assess how our training and other loads impact on our recovery. So as an athlete, we might measure like our pace, our power, our perceived exertion, but we might also want to measure other stresses in our life. So we might, have a stress score or a readiness to train score or a profile and mood state score in order to be able to put the pieces of our puzzle together of when we've had a good training block, when we're feeling recovered and fresh, and we've had like nice progressions across our training in terms of, whatever our outcomes are that we're trying to progress, or when those things have just sucked and tanked. So understanding what training load is important, but it's also massively important to understand the limitations of how we might measure training load and how those relate to the other areas of training load as well, and what outcomes we try and get from that as an athlete or a coach. I hope that video has been really useful, guys. I'm going to try and keep these videos as short and sharp as I can. Like I said, I'm going to try and keep them under 8 minutes if possible. Please like and subscribe these videos if you want to these videos if you want more of them. I'll just keep churning them out anyway, but it's really helpful to get more reach to this channel. The more reach it gets, then the more time I get to do these videos as well, or the more encouragement I get to do these videos. So please, if you've liked it, if it's been useful, give it a like and a subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you next time when I talk about cardiac drift.